Addidi Wealth is a financial services boutique for women, their partners and families. We plan and manage wealth to enable our clients to live a richer life. In doing so, we form some very deep relationship with our clients and work with them over the long term to help them realise their ambitions and dreams. More recently, Addidi has set out on a quest to explore what a well-lived life looks like for women today. In doing so, we're having a conversation with Dame Shirley, a personal hero of mine, to explore how her life has been a well-lived life and her definition of a worthy life as she describes it in her book. What is your definition of life, a worthy life, and do you think that differs from a life well lived for you?
I think a definition of worthy for me is this sort of inbred feeling that I want to leave the world, I want to make a difference, I want to leave the world a little bit better than I found it. And that sort of drives me for most of the time, quite honestly. And it comes up in different guises, but that is really part of it. Is it a life worth living? You can interpret that question in many ways. Have I enjoyed my life? The answer is yes. You know, if one was asked to give marks out of 10 for my satisfaction in life, it's probably 9.999. There's still a few things I want to do, but very high.
Thank you. I suppose looking at the role the family and friends play in our lives and a life well lived, you had a pretty tough childhood and a distant relationship with your parents, particularly your mother. How big a role do you feel family and friends play in your endeavours to live a worthy life?
Well, I think for my family, my birth family, I have very much the idea of public service. My father was a judge, my mother became a teacher, my sister was in social work, and now largely I seem to be doing something very similar. So some of those trends come out, some of those drivers come out from my family, and perhaps you're genetic, perhaps you're born with that need to do something. The wish to make a difference is a sort of fairly selfish thing, because I feel better when I've actually made something happen. I'm satisfied with my own performance, and I know that, in particular, giving makes me feel very good.
I personally feel that nurturing is part of our DNA. Do you think that's under threat now as we begin to take a bigger and bigger role at work and an equal role in the workplace?
It's when you're trying to combine a family life and your responsibilities there, including looking after yourself, with a vigorous professional career, that it can become very difficult. I always remember in the 60s, actually, a colleague of mine, she's now a good friend, we worked on a conference and we'd been on our feet all day and the exhibition and so on. And it had been very successful, and some Japanese gentlemen invited us, we'd been talking with, obviously, had invited us out to dinner. And we were really so tired we didn't want to go at all. But we went, of course, except who, this might be a wonderful Japanese client next week. But we turned up and there were geisha girls and beautifully dressed, beautifully groomed and full of smiles. And my friend Penny and I were just exhausted. And you look at them and you think, well, have I made the right choice in my life?
Would you say wealth is a necessity for a life well lived? And if so, do you have a feel for what level of wealth is good, if you like, for us or for an individual?
There's a young man in Oxford, he's an academic, and he is married, currently without children, who has committed as part of his philanthropic pledge, you obviously know about it, to live at a level which I think was 20,000 or something like that. And I asked him, because I did know him slightly, has your wife, does she agree? Well, what about when children come? But the wife has also agreed. So at that level, he feels that he can lead a good life, a worthy life, and he's committed long term to it. I do know I've been very poor, and I never ever want to be poor again. And certainly my company was more about getting me out of poverty than making a lot of money. Well, in those sort of early days of multitasking, it was not really in it. I hardly had time to stop and think how I felt about anything. It was a sort of frenetic activity, not very healthy, but if I had stopped and thought, I would sort of come back to something that I see quite clearly now, that to me, happiness is linked to success, not necessarily material success, an achievement in a task that I find difficult. I'm very easily bored, so if I do something that I've done several times before, I don't perform, and I know that I just get bored. But to do something that I know is going to be difficult and take 6, 9, over a year to do it, that gives me an enormous sense of genuine happiness. And I think everybody's very different about that, but it's not the sort of quick, I had my hair done this morning, yes, of course, that's very pleasurable, but I do it for you, in your honour, not because it particularly makes me happy. I've had a great deal of inspiration from books, from Mother Teresa's writings and so on. But in real life, the person that has given me most impact managerially is my first boss. Not because he was very good, but he taught me the sort of boss I did not want to be. And that, I go back to that, how would I have liked to work in that situation? And things have changed very much. And there's a famous book talk about do as you would be done by. And that's what we really mean when we're managing other people. Do as you would be done by. Would I want to be asked to do this job? I don't ask people to do jobs that I wouldn't be prepared to do myself. And that's tough.
If you were a young woman today, or looking at young women today, what would be your pearls of wisdom for them, I suppose?
Well, find something that you're passionate about, and it's changed over my lifetime. Now I'm passionate about autism. Previously I was passionate about computers, about women. But find something that you really care about, then learn about it so that you don't approach it in an amateur way, and then just go for it. Just try it. Go for it. Failure is nothing to be ashamed of, and you really have to try things and go for it. And a lot of women find, I'm not sure if I could do that, or would I want to do that?
What would you say have been the best experience of your life, and why?
I think the food for my soul comes from all the spiritual things, by which I mean the non-material things. Classical music to me is quite important, and if I don't hear it for some time, I crave it like I crave food. I love and collect contemporary modern art in a very modest way. And I try and share that by giving works of art to Paintings in Hospitals, which is a charity that puts quality paintings into hospitals and hospices, doctors' waiting rooms and so on. So that's something that is fairly general. What I did a couple of years ago, was it 1 year or 2 years, Lynn, when we went to Oxford and spoke to an organisation called 80,000 Hours. That was a bright young undergraduates who had got the idea that most careers take about 80,000 hours of your life. And they had the concept, how do we make that worthwhile? Do we spend it flat out making money and then go and give it all to the Salvation Army? Or do we mix and match it with socially desirable things and make sure that the business that we run is itself worth having and a worthwhile business. And I've gone for the second, really. The business that I ran was a company of women, a company for women. It wasn't there to make money, it was there with a sort of crusade. People laughed at me because in those days women were very much second-class citizens. I was the first woman this, the only woman that. But to actually make the way in which you spend so much of the time in your life something that is valuable to you and to others, I think is well worthwhile. And I think that little charity, it's in Oxford, which is where Lynn and I came across it. I think it's also now in Cambridge. And I think those youngsters have got a good idea. I think that's fine to get that balance right.
Is giving, in whatever form, the single biggest contributor to a life well lived?
Well, the short answer is yes. You haven't time for the long answer. The medium-term answer is that giving takes many forms. People give blood, people give organs, people give time, people give expertise, they give introduction, and they give money. And philanthropy has nothing to do with how much money you give. It's the way in which you give it. So if you pass a beggar in the street and put 50p into his cap, that's a generous act of charity. But once you start thinking, well, what's he doing on the street? Why is he on the street? Does he have nowhere to live? Then you start thinking and acting as a philanthropist, irrespective of whether you're talking about £5 or £50,000. And that sort of giving really, giving is good for you or something like that. If we act unselfishly for the majority of the time, we feel good for the majority of the time.
Do you think living a happy life is synonymous with a well-lived life? Or do you think you could have a well-lived life and not necessarily be happy?
Oh, I'm sure that's possible. And I've certainly seen people who are leading very well-lived lives, but are clearly far from happy. Some of it is this drive of that leads to depression. If you're never ever satisfied with what you did yesterday, you always want something more. And we compare ourselves with our peer group, both intellectually. Did she speak better? Did he do better? Did he earn more? Did he have a better car? All these sorts of things can make you very discontent. And so the non-material part of life, and I know you're concerned with money management, is just as important, I think, to the inner spirituality that I think most of us really seek.
Thank you for joining us. I've hoped you enjoyed our conversation with Dame Shirley. We would love to hear from you to tell us what your definition of a well-lived life is, and you can do so by visiting us on our website www.addidi.com. We look forward to hearing from you.